The Lost Track of Time, Chapter 6. That's it? That's the story of the great Moodler? Penelope stared at Dill, willing him to continue. Dill nodded. That's it. Kronos took over and she disappeared? Poof! Dill waved his hand in the air, just like that. What about the remote possibility? Cried Penelope. Dill shook his head sadly. After the great Moodler disappeared, the remote possibility shrank down to nothing. It hasn't been seen for ages. Penelope sat in stunned silence. While listening to the story of the great Moodler, a feeling of excitement had taken hold of her. The great Moodler was an expert problem solver and a creative genius. If anyone could get her ideas flowing again, it was her. With her ideas back, Penelope could figure out how to make her dreams of being a writer come true. She could even figure out a way to get home, if she wanted to. Anything was possible. But the great Moodler was gone, and only 217 things were possible. I told you leaving was highly unlikely, continued Dill. Now you know why. If Kronos knew you were here, he'd declare your arrival impossible and whisk you away to the tower. I see what you mean, said Penelope in a daze. Dill leaned across the table and gave her arm a gentle squeeze. It's not so bad here. As long as we stay away from the city, we can moodle all we want. Besides, it sounds like your Spicewood estates are overrun with clockworkers. Penelope gave him a weak smile. She couldn't bear to tell him the truth. Staying wasn't the problem. She liked it here. There was no daily schedule to follow or workflow diagram to dictate her days. The problem was moodling. Maybe Dill could moodle all he wanted, but she couldn't. Her ideas were stuck, and with the great Moodler gone, they were likely to stay that way. Dill, said Penelope, her heart caught in her chest, have you ever tried to find the great Moodler? Dill's shoulders slumped and his eyes glistened with what looked like tears. Of course I tried. I was looking for her when I bumped into you. I've moodled for days, weeks, months. I can't come up with a single idea, much less a real possibility, as to where she is. I'm afraid it's hopeless, useless, absolutely futile. Penelope thought about all the bad story ideas she'd come up with in the last few weeks, and the blank wall her mind had eventually become. She knew exactly how he felt. I don't know what happened, said Dill, wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. I used to be a great explorer. I could find anything, absolutely anything. He glanced up at Penelope with a wry smile. I was the one who found the remote possibility, you know. Penelope's mouth dropped open. You were? Oh, yes. Distant memories, buried dreams, lost hopes. I found them all. I was a real hero in those days. You should have heard the people cheering when I came back from an expedition. But that's all over now. Exploring has been declared a waste of time, and therefore impossible, by decree of Kronos. I haven't found anything in ages. Dill sighed a deep, unhappy sigh. He stared down at the floor, his shoulders still hunched. A moment later, he popped up and stared at Penelope, as if seeing her for the very first time. Maybe you could give it a try. Penelope glanced around. Give what a try? Dill ignored her question. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. He rushed out of the room and soon returned with a small, shiny object. What is it? Asked Penelope. It's a Moodle hat. Dill gave the hat a quick snap of the wrist, and the top popped up. It was shaped like a bowl, with a flat rim about 3 inches wide. He handed the hat gently to Penelope, who examined it. It was made of some sort of silvery mesh material. How does it work? She asked. Dill leaned forward, his eyes practically glowing. Now that is a very good question. On the outside it looks ordinary, unremarkable, extremely plain. But on the inside it couldn't be more fantastic. The lining is full of very small, very sophisticated straps, sticky snatchers, grabby gadgets, spring-loaded snappers, the works. Penelope peered under the hat to see the straps. You can't see anything, explained Dill. It's all microscopic. You'll never guess what the traps do. Never, ever. So, I'll just have to tell you, they trap ideas, Penelope. All those glorious ideas streaming and bubbling out of your head, all the ideas you couldn't keep a hold of until snap. He flung his arms wide, then slammed his hands together. The Moodle hat traps them for good. Imagine, said Dill, walking wildly about. The biggest, fattest, grandest ideas are all yours, and the skinny, scrawny ones escape into the stratosphere, where they can fatten up a bit before dropping down and lodging in someone else's head. Dill spun around to face her. Without this hat, I never would have found the remote possibility, and now you can use it to find the Great Moodler. Me? Squeaked Penelope. Yes, you. Ever since Kronos took over and the Great Moodler disappeared, I've felt lost. And how can I find anyone if I can't find myself? But you, said Dill, giving Penelope's arm a little shake, you might be able to moodle up an idea of where she went. Dill looked so hopeful. Penelope couldn't bear to tell him that there was no chance of her coming up with a little idea, much less a big one. You go first, she said, stalling for time, to show me how it's done. All right. Dill took the hat and put it on. He hurried over to the couch and lay down, propping his head up on the armrest. He said, tapping his cheeks with a long finger. Where is the Great Moodler? Penelope sat down on a moss-covered chair to watch. Her feet dangled to the floor and she tapped them nervously. Tap, tap, tap. There was no way she could be of any help. Tap, tap, tap. She might come up with a few lame fantasies, but she was all out of good ideas. Dill was sure to be disappointed. Tap, tap, tap. Dill glared at her. Sorry, she mouthed. Penelope sat as still as she could, almost not daring to breathe, and waited. After a while, Dill closed his eyes, and Penelope thought he had fallen asleep. But every once in a while, he'd scrunch his mouth or tweak his nose, and the waiting would continue. Watching someone do nothing made Penelope sleepy, and soon her head began to dip and sway in a lazy arc. Snap! She yanked herself back to attention, but her head dipped again and again. Before long she lost the struggle and fell into a light sleep, her head resting on her chest. Drat! Fiddlesticks! Gosh darn it all! Penelope jerked awake. What's wrong? She asked, trying to sound alert. I don't have any ideas, said Dill. None. Zero. Absolute zilch. It's just like before. Try staring out a window, offered Penelope. I don't have any windows, grumbled Dill. He took off the hat and held it out to Penelope. Here, you try. My mind is blank. Penelope knew the feeling all too well. She took the hat and held it in her lap for a moment. What am I supposed to do again? She asked. You don't do anything, insisted Dill. If you do something, you'll muck it all up. Just let your mind wander and the hat will capture any big ideas. But don't think too hard, and absolutely no analyzing or figuring out of any kind. Penelope slowly raised the hat up to her head. There's no way this is going to work, she said to herself. I'm all out of ideas. I don't know what I'm doing. I hope Dill won't be mad, and Penelope's last thought was cut off as she lowered the hat onto her head. She heard, or rather felt, a soft whir, whir. Now, ask yourself where the Great Moodler is, whispered Dill. But remember, no thinking. Just let your mind go. Penelope tried to concentrate on the question while at the same time not thinking. Felt like she was trying to open a door and shut it at the same time. Sometimes a thought floated by. I wonder what the great Moodler looks like. Or, my foot is falling asleep. But for the most part, nothing came to mind. Penelope stared at the nothing. It was bright and beautiful. Somehow it made her feel peaceful. Whir, whir, whir. The longer she stared at the nothing, the faster the whirring sound went. Does the whirring mean it's working? She wondered. If so, where are all the ideas? Penelope let these thoughts slip away, and for a minute, or was it an hour, she slipped away with them. Just then she felt a snap. It vibrated through her body and brought her back to reality. She opened her eyes. Dill was staring at the hat. "That's really something," he said in a hushed voice. Penelope slowly lowered the hat from her head. It had grown. The silvery mesh material had stretched to the size of a beach ball. Something like a huge bubble struggled to get out, and then pop! Just like that, it disappeared. Dill turned quickly to Penelope. "So what's the big idea?" he demanded. Penelope shrugged. I don't know." "You mean nothing came to mind?" "Nothing," said Penelope. "Nothing like nil, nada, diddly squat?" Penelope nodded. Dill's shoulders sagged. "Oh, well, I suppose the bubble is just an anomaly. We'll try again in the morning." Penelope wondered what anomaly meant. She decided it must be another word for failure. Come back for Chapter 7.